Good morning, fellow ruminators. Welcome back to another session, Rumination with Andrew. And it is my distinct pleasure to be with you one more time to discuss a very important topical matter. Now, this morning, as many of our countries in the Western world are gearing up for elections, right, including the United States, among other nations in the Western Hemisphere, are gearing up for elections, we are going to talk about this morning the differences and the similarities, perhaps more so differences, between conservatism rather, and liberalism. Now, we do know that the media is hyping a lot about those who are conservatives and those who are liberals. And sometimes I find that people just don't understand um, what these words entail, right? What they signify. A lot of times we do things because traditionally that's what our parents did. Culturally, that's what we were told, was the right thing to do, right? So the fact of the matter is that sometimes we need to reflect on and to think more seriously about things that we do and sometimes to question. And to question does not mean, therefore, that you are saying nay, that something is wrong with your belief system, something is wrong with what you do, but you're simply trying to understand more deeply why you do the things that you do. And a lot of times, if we tell the truth, we do not always question why we do the things we do because, for the most part, the majority within our group, that's what they do. So we think that's the same thing that we should do. And the pandemic taught us, and many persons did what they did because the group members, that's what they did. And they felt comfortably within themselves that um, that was what the best decision for them and perhaps their families. Now, we're going to look at conservative versus liberal and what are the differences at, or if there are any similarities. But we're doing a comparative analysis of these two political ideology. And sometimes I really wonder if these ideologies, political ideologies, are not also religious in some ways, because people tend to be so connected, right, to these ideologies that you'll hear comments like, wow, even though I'm a conservative, what that liberal says, I believe it. Now, I am not so tethered to a particular ideology that I cannot see facts and truths, right? I am more tethered to what is the truth. Where does the truth in this matter lie? These are some of the questions that you need to ask as you go to the ballot, whatever country that you find yourselves in, before you cast your vote, if you still have some trust in the political machine. Now, the epithet conservative or liberal is used to describe political and economic views and affiliations, right? So the meaning of conservative or liberal could be different in different contexts, social, economic, and political. And I want to add here also religious, right? Because right now we have the political world has even entered the religious realm. So you find that even within Christian denominations, you have conservative Christians and you also have liberal Christians, right? You have conservative Adventists and you have liberal Adventists. So this is how serious the politics has become, right? That even in the church, people tend to be divided over politics and they have politicized the Bible, right? And have brought God down to the low level, right? Of men, of how men think, right? Now, let's begin to look at the differences, the comparative analysis here. The political views, in terms of their political views, conservatives, right? We call them right wing, right? So they are anti-federalist, which means that they do not believe in big government, prefer smaller government, less regulation, most services to be provided by the private sector in a free market, and a literal interpretation of the Constitution. So these are what conservatives believe in, right? So they're right-wing. We normally call them the right-wingers, right? And they are anti-federalist, which means that they are not pro-big government. They prefer, as we're saying, a smaller government and less regulation, and most services to be provided by the private sector in a free market, and a literal interpretation of the Constitution. Now, we can say that to some extent we might agree with some of these principles, but that's what they believe in, right? Let's move on. Liberal. Liberal are what we call left-wing federalists. So they believe in big governments, prefer more regulation and services like free universal health care to be provided by the government to all citizens, right? Now, remember now we're just giving you the differences. We're not going to have a conversation which we've had before, that the government and the private sectors either really are one, right? They are merged together, right? And they are welded together. And we've got to understand that. So what we're just giving you the classical meaning and understanding of what we mean by conservative and liberal. Now, economic values or their economic views. Government, that's for the conservative. Conservatives believe that government should tax less and spend less. Cutting spending to balance the budget should be the priority. Higher income earners should have an incentive to invest credits. Charity is the responsibility of the people, right? So they believe that the government should tax us, less, and that people at the higher echelon of the economic scale should be taxed more. And if people are poor and they need to be helped, then they should be helped by charitable people, right? By charitable organizations, right? That is what they believe. Now, let's look at the liberals on their economic worldview, right? Their economic worldview is based on the fact that government should provide more services to the less fortunate, like healthcare, and increase taxes if necessary, because the taxes definitely will pay for that, the expenditure in healthcare and among other social programs. High-income earners should pay a larger percentage of their income as taxes. So both of them believe here that, higher income earners should definitely pay a higher rate of taxes. Now, is that possible? Is that going to happen, right? I do not think so, but that is what they believe. Now, what are their social views? The conservative social views, right? Let us look at what they believe in terms of their social views. They're opposed, now the conservative now, in terms of their social views, conservatives are opposed to gay marriage, abortion, and embryonic stem cell research. They support the right to bear arms, death penalty, and personal responsibility as an individual, right? So they are not pro the well, what liberals define as gender equality, in terms of having transgender people and gay rights and so forth, stuff like that. They are against that. Conservatives are against that, right? Abortion, embryonic stem cell research, they oppose that also, and they support the right to bear arms, death penalty, and personal responsibility as an individual, right? Now, liberals, gay couples to get equal rights like everyone else, example, marriage, right? So that's what liberals stand for. So if you're liberal and you are a Christian, it means therefore that you are not, how can you say that you are a believer in the Bible and you believe in gay marriage, right? And this is a conflict with many Christians who tend to be voting for, for liberal parties, right? They are conflicted because, they have ideologies that they themselves as Christians do not believe in, yet they vote for that party. How can you? So we have abortion should be legal, support embryonic stem cell research, support restrictions and regulation around the right to bear arms, right? So that's what liberals, when it comes to their social views, right? That's what they believe in. So if you're in your country and you're voting for a left-wing party, These are their social values, right? And our social values, first of all, those of us who think we're Christians, who are Christians, our religious values should trump our social values, should define our social values, right? Because even the Catholic Church, that's what they do, right? That their religious values define their social values. The Catholic Church always talk about its social doctrines, right? In terms of what governs society. It means what it believes in from a religious perspective, right? So it's very important that we understand these concepts. I've always wondered, reading about, for example, the Democratic Party in the United States. And I've always wondered why, for the most part, Black people who tend to be conservative in their values, right, in their social values, that is, why is it that they have been so tethered to the Democratic Party when a lot of times it does not share their social values. But I understand, therefore, that the Democratic Party was a party of civil rights in the 1960s. And for this reason, they have remained loyal to that party. But the fact of the matter is that it's a party that is opposite, the complete opposite to your, what you call it, to Black people's, to African Americans, that is, social value system, right? Because they are from a social value system. Black Americans tend to be, and Black people in general, right, around the world tend to be conservative in their from a social perspective, their social value systems, right? That is a fact. I'm not saying now that we're homogenous in all Black people are the same, because there are some Black people who are different. But I find it so much interesting that we tend as a group sometimes to be so connected to the Democratic Party, right? Even though the Democratic Party does not largely share a lot of our religious and social values as a people, as a race, if you will, if you think there is a race. Now, let's look at the personal responsibility in terms of the conservative. Now, we say a conservative individuals should exercise personal responsibility, and it is to the government's role to hold them accountable, even with severe penalties. Laws are enacted to reflect the best interest of the society as a whole, right? So they're saying that personal responsibility is important, and laws should be made to govern people's behavior. And people's behaviors should largely be held accountable by them, right? Not necessarily by the group, but by them, right? We tend to live in a society, and I think to this, I'll say something that, yeah, I agree with this sort of value system, because, let us say, for example, and I probably find it ad nauseum that I'm bringing up Claudine Gay, but let us say, the fact that the accusations leveled against her about um, uh, plagiarism is true, right? And perhaps it is true, right? But people then begin to label her as she should bear the brunt of the responsibility for all Black people, because all Black people plagiarize. Because Claudine Gay plagiarized, it means therefore that all Black people plagiarize and that they are incompetent. And that's not true, right? Claudine Gay's errors and blunders should be dealt with and should be, um, you know, she should be held accountable for her own individual choice as a person and not as a group, as a race. So we tread down this sort of thing. And even when they, put up, Claudine Gay and Kamala Harris as the vice president of the United States, and says, they're representing Black people. Are they really representing Black people? The fact of the matter, you might say there's a Black face there, but it doesn't mean, therefore, that they are representative of Black people, just like how, was it Bush or Trump might not be representative of white people, right? When Bush was, making his lots of blunders on the world stage, right? I think one time he was in Argentina, and I think he said he was in Rio de Janeiro, right? And Rio de Janeiro is in Brazil, right? So there are lots of blunders and other things that Trump made, not to mention his academic performance while at, Yale and Harvard universities, right? Very poor, right? And very abysmal academic performance by the President George W. Bush, right? The son. Now, people are not saying that he is representative of the white race, or when we have people of that race who are mediocre, we just hold them accountable. We don't hold the entire race or people accountable. But we find that when you talk about minorities, particularly Black people, because, that's what sells, in America, when they talk about Black people, it sells, right? It's news and it sells. So when you have somebody, who um, ascends to a very high position, they tend to believe that that person is representing the that particular minority race. And it's time for Black people to understand, and other minorities in America to understand. I don't like to use the word minority because I don't think anybody is a minority in their country, right? I think the whole minority is pejorative, right? It is the meaning, right? It is not something that should be used if you were born in a particular country, right? I can understand if you're a foreign, but if you were born in the US or in in Great Britain or Germany or wherever you were born, irrespective of your skin color, you are a part of that majority because you were born on that soil with all the rights that of a citizen, right, should be accorded to you. So you are not any minority, right? And people ought not to think of themselves, right, as any minority. We can say statistically, when we're talking about what percentages of X or Y or Z we have in the country in terms of ethnic group, right? And respecting those groups, yes, we can talk about that. But to suggest that a person is minority in all spheres of life is ridiculous, right? Is ridiculous, is ludicrous, and is infantile at best. And it's time for us to grow up as a society. But we know that in the United States, they like to talk about this majority minority understanding as if, the person's skin color makes him a majority. And a majority implies, it connotates this sort of superiority that he has more rights or should have more rights in that particular country, because persons who tend to have a phenotypical appearance like he or she does gives him that sort of right. That is nonsense, rubbish, right? Now, let's look at the liberals in terms of their views on personal responsibility. Now, the liberals believe that people should look to the government to provide a structure. Laws are enacted to protect every individual for an equal society, sometimes at the expense of economic freedom, if necessary, right? So sometimes at your expense. So you have to, in other words, it's a common good. And this is a social doctrine taught by the Roman Catholic Church, that you should give up your right, if it serves the common good, right? And COVID was a stark example of what happened and the response to that particular epidemic, right? Health epidemic, that we had to obey the dictates of government for the common good, right? Even though it might, destroy your business, right? Set back your education, and might also destroy you psychologically, right? But you have to do it for the common good, right? So this is what the whole personal responsibility, that we should do things, or laws should be made which makes all of us equal, right? Now, the understanding of equality is that we should all have our rights acknowledged and respected, right? Now, that's never going to happen in any given society, right? And we do know who controls any given society. The elites control any given society. And they control the economic realm, they control the political world, right? And the machinery. And they also control the religious realm, whether we like it or not, that we live in. That's why when Christ was on earth, the Jews, and Christ was a Jew, were against him because the elites, the Jewish elites, then found his ministry and his teachings to be in complete opposition to what they learned in school and to what their culture taught them, not understanding that their culture had been so adulterated by what they had seen around them from other nations that they had become so contaminated. So when Christ came to preach this unadulterated gospel message to them, they were not willing to accept that particular doctrine or teachings because they had already been immersed in their own erroneous understanding of what the whole Jewish customs and rites and traditions were to be. So we've got to be careful here when we talk about conservatism versus liberalism. And those of you who are conservatives, right, you must also understand that there is a danger. If you're a Christian, believing that you've got to vote for somebody who says that he or she is conservative. Remember now that the conservatives and the liberals are controlled by one entity, right? The global elites, right? And also in the context of the United States, the military-industrial complex, right? So it means, therefore, that whether you're conservative or you are a liberal, that is only, you know, a word, right? A title to describe who you are, but it really doesn't mean anything in terms of what we see in the world. If you watch the United States politics, you will understand that they believe in COG, they embrace the concept. Every politician in the United States embrace the concept of COG. That's the continuity of government, right? Which means that government continues to do the same thing that their previous, should I say now, colleague left them to do, right? So you must understand. Now, when they talk about abortion rights and they talk about gay rights and all of these are issues to social issues to divide us, right? Because it's a social to divide and conquer. They do not believe in equality by any stretch of the imagination. And that is what we need to understand. And I do not think you understand that yet. So when you are going on the streets and you are protesting, for rights, right? And these people are not concerned about your right. What we need to do is to come together as a people and to understand that in terms of the economic realm, they are together, right? Now, one of the things that we need to understand as I end this video is that the elites also tend to not be united because their major god is the devil. The devil controls the wealth and the power and the authorities of this world, right? That's why the Bible says that we're not wrestling against flesh and blood, but we're wrestling against what principalities and powers, right? Positions in people in high places, right? We're wrestling against higher forces. It's not the Joe Bidens or the Donald Trumps, okay, against which we are waging this war, right? And we need to understand that. As a result of that, because the devil controls the world and its wealth and its riches and its power, its glory, they are not united. And I was reading a book yesterday by Ronald Robinson. Yeah, I think it's Ronald Robinson, right? On the Haitian Revolution. And he mentioned some very good points, but one of the points that he mentioned, and the same thing happened also during the Civil War in the United States, right? Whilst the elites in Haiti, right, the minority white people in Haiti at the time during the Haitian Revolution and the mulatto class, whilst they were divided, even though they represented the elite class, but they had different worldview, and they didn't like each other also. They were suspicious of each other. In the elite world, people tend to be suspicious of each other. So even though we think the Bill Gates and all these people are together and they are united, they are also not united. They are united against us. So the elites, the mulattoes, and the white minorities were united against the majority black population in Haiti, particularly during the revolution. To this day, also, they're still united against the majority black population. Now, when the black population saw that they were so disunited in terms of around the French Revolution and its value systems, the French Revolution didn't have anything to do with the Haitian, liberating the Haitians from their from the nightmare of slavery, right? But the slaves united, right, and fought against the elites and made that revolution their revolution. And that's why we call it the Haitian Revolution. They turned that French Revolution that started in 1789 and in 1791, when the slaves learned about it through through the plantation managers who were talking about what was happening in France, they made it and they joined efforts together and waged a war against the colonial and their slave masters and won. Because again, we said, united we stand, divided we fall. It's a spiritual law. But so we need to understand that that is a spiritual law that united we stand, divided we fall, right? Again, in the United States, right? And that is why when we hear, what's that girl's name again? Nikki Haley, right? She was suggesting that the Civil War was not fought over slavery. The fact of the matter is that, in truth, they didn't want the Civil War to be fought over slavery, even though the war was really over slavery. But these guys were so haughty that they were saying we couldn't allow blacks to think that a war was being fought over these inferior creatures of the soil when they were the inferior creatures of the soil. But the fact of the matter is, when black people saw how divided the whites in the north and whites in the south were, right? They were divided. They said, we are going to make this war our own. And they fought a war against the white masters, overlords, against their white enemies, and they won the war. In fact, had blacks not participated in that civil war, which they initially didn't want them, neither the North nor the South wanted blacks to participate. I hope you understand that, right? So when you're saying that the North, was fighting for freedom, freedom for whom? Certainly not for black people, right? Black people fought that war for themselves, right? But eventually, we had the Frederick Douglass who went to Abraham Lincoln and convinced him that blacks needed to be a part of that war, because before blacks were included, the North was losing the war. People think that this was just a simple thing where the North went and they fought against the Southerners and they won. Wasn't as easy as that. It is more textured and a much more complex history than we think it is. And the same thing here with our politics, right? We've got to be united against the global and local elites as a people, because they are not trying to liberate us. As the Northerners were not trying to liberate the slaves from the nightmare of slavery. They weren't, right? They will say so that you can believe and that you can join efforts to them and that they can wage a war on you and they win, right? But we must understand that as a global population, right, that we are in that sort of nightmare, or we're approaching another nightmare of slavery. And it doesn't matter the color of your skin, right? What matters is that you understand that liberalism or conservatism is not your friend, right? And I'm not saying now that you cannot support a particular leader, right, that you think might have some standards, but don't ever believe that one particular leader, as Abraham Lincoln, was not the person that freed the slaves, right? We have been told that so often. The slaves freed themselves, right? And they took up arms and they did what they had to do. They made that war for themselves. They tailored the war for freedom. When they saw how divided their overlords were, they said, this is a time and we are going to make a strike. And with the help of God Almighty, they made the strike and they won, right? So we need to come to grips with some of these grim realities and get out of this conservative camp or this liberal camp because they all belong to the same elite class, right? And these people are not your friends. They're not my friends, right? We should be each other's friends because we find ourselves in the same class of exploitation, economic exploitation, political exploitation, and social exploitation. Freedom means that we should allow people, whilst they're not breaking the law, to believe what they want to believe. Having studied, having informed them, having had interesting and serious debates, right? They should be living the way how they want to live. We must not foist our behavior as much as it is might be wholesome, right? I believe the Christian religion is a wholesome, the Bible believing religion is a wholesome religion, but it should not be foisted onto people. That was not God's intention. God's intention was whomsoever will let him come. What we see now is that the political world is morphing into this religious sphere. And not only the liberal, not only the conservatives, the liberals are also doing it, right? Even though they say that they are anti-religion, right? But they are also foisting their atheistic value system, right, onto the population and their anti-biblical worldview onto the population, while conservatives are pushing back and saying we have to foist our biblical understanding of the world onto you because this is a biblical, this is a Christian nation, and it is not a Christian nation, right? It's a nation built on Christian values, but it's not a Christian nation. And a Christian also, we talk about being Christian nation, or remember now that the enlightened Christian um, doctrine or belief system has so many different denominations, right? That you have the Baptists, you have Pentecostals, you have the Church of God, so many, and they have different worldviews and different belief systems, right? And that is why the United States cannot be a Christian nation because it is a Protestant nation. We can say that. And a Protestant nation means that it is the home of many different religions. And those religions should converge on the soil and should be able to live together in freedom, right? So don't let these conservative titles, right, and epithets control your understanding of what your responsibility as a Christian and as a person, as an individual. And if there are laws or worldviews on the conservative realm that you think, jive well with your worldview, then you should be able to embrace that particular word. Don't think because I'm liberal that I can't embrace a conservative value. And if I'm a conservative, I can't embrace a liberal value, right? Because I like to tell people that I'm conservative liberal. I'm a conservative liberal, right? Because there are some aspects of conservative that I embrace in terms of their worldview, and there's some aspects of the liberal worldview that I embrace, right? But I can't say that I'm liberal and just, begin to think that that is the worldview, because that makes me into a very narrow person. Thank you so much for joining. I hope that you will join me in another session when next we see each other. Bye.